Have you ever returned from an amazing trip, but when it was time to tell how it went, in English, to your friends and family, you could only say, "It was good," or "I liked it"? If that's your case, good thing you're here in this video. Today you'll learn, in slow and clear English, how to describe your travel experiences in English in an engaging and memorable way. You'll discover how to go far beyond the basics and transform your stories into narratives that truly capture people's attention. And you'll also follow today a dialogue between two tourists where we'll give real examples of how to tell travel details. It's going to be great for accelerating your learning. And we'll still reveal an extra powerful tip about how to use the 5 senses technique to make your stories unforgettable. I'm very excited to share this with you because storytelling is one of the most natural and enjoyable ways to practice English. You'll feel more confident, and you'll realize that people really want to hear what you have to say. Let's get started. So, let's get straight to the point. When you return from a trip, people naturally ask about your experience. But there is a big difference between simply listing places you visited and actually telling a story that makes people feel like they were there with you. I'll separate the teachings into parts to make your understanding easier. Part 1. Going beyond the basics. Most people who travel learn to say phrases like, "I went to Paris," or "I visited the Eiffel Tower." It's correct, but it's very basic and doesn't create connection. The secret lies in adding details, emotions, and context. For example, instead of just saying you went to Paris, you can describe the moment you arrived there. Think about how you felt when you saw the Eiffel Tower for the first time. Were you surprised? Excited? Was it a sunny or rainy day? These details make all the difference. Let's see some practical examples of how to transform basic phrases into engaging stories. Instead of simply saying, "I went to Tokyo," you can say, "Last spring, I finally made it to Tokyo. And the moment I stepped out of the train station in Shibuya, I was completely mesmerized by the neon lights and the sea of people crossing the famous intersection." Or imagine you visited Barcelona. Instead of "I visited Barcelona," try, "When I arrived in Barcelona, I immediately fell in love with the city's energy. The colorful architecture of Gaudi seemed to dance under the Mediterranean sun. And I knew this trip would be unforgettable for a trip to Cairo." Transform "I saw the pyramids" into "Standing in front of the Great Pyramid of Giza. For the first time left me speechless. I had seen it in pictures my whole life, but nothing prepared me for the actual scale and majesty of this ancient wonder." See the difference? You're creating a scene, not just reporting a fact. Let's move to part 2, describing emotions and sensations now. Let's talk about how to express your emotions during the trip. This is fundamental because people connect with feelings, not just with facts. If something surprised you, you can say you were amazed or stunned. For moments of intense joy, expressions like "I was over the moon" or "I felt so alive" convey that positive energy. And if you had a moment of peace and tranquility, you can say, "I felt so peaceful," or "It was incredibly calming." But not everything on a trip is perfect, right? Sometimes we face challenges. If something was difficult or tiring, you can say it was challenging but rewarding, or I was exhausted but it was worth it. This shows you're authentic and makes your story more real. In part 3, we'll talk about sensory details. The 5 senses, this is where the magic really happens. When you include sensory details in your story, you transport the person to that moment. Let's explore each sense with practical examples. Describing what you saw. For sight, describe colors, shapes, light. Instead of just saying the beach was beautiful, be specific. Santorini example, the whitewashed buildings with their bright blue domes contrasted beautifully against the deep blue Aegean Sea. Everywhere I looked, it was like a postcard come to life. New York example, Times Square at night was a sensory overload. Giant digital screens flashed with vibrant colors, and thousands of people moved in every direction like a choreographed chaos. Marrakesh example, the sunset over the Sahara Desert painted the sand dunes in shades of gold, orange, and deep red. The shadows grew longer, and the entire landscape seemed to glow. For sound, think about the noises around you and how they created the atmosphere of the place. Venice, example, the city was surprisingly quiet. All I could hear was the gentle splash of water against the gondolas and the distant sound of someone singing an Italian opera. Mumbai example, the streets were alive with sound. Car horns honked constantly, street vendors called out to customers, and Bollywood music played from every corner shop. Reykjavik example, standing near the waterfall. The roar of the water was so powerful that I couldn't hear my own thoughts. It was both terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Describing the aromas, smell is powerful for evoking memories. Be specific about the aromas that marked your trip. Paris, example. Every morning, the smell of fresh croissants and strong espresso drifted from the corner bakery. It was the perfect way to start the day. Bangkok example. Walking through the night market. The air was filled with the spicy aroma of pad thai, lemongrass, and grilled seafood. My mouth watered instantly. Istanbul example. The Grand Bazaar was a feast for the nose. The sweet scent of Turkish delight mixed with the earthy smell of spices like cumin, saffron, and cinnamon. Describing textures and physical sensations, for touch, describe textures and temperatures you experienced. Maldives example, the sand was so fine and soft, it felt like walking on powder. And when I stepped into the crystal clear water, it was perfectly warm and soothing. Patagonia example, the wind in Patagonia was fierce and cold. It hit my face like tiny needles, reminding me just how wild and untamed this place was. Petra example, I ran my fingers along the ancient carved stone walls. They were rough and weathered by thousands of years, yet still standing strong. Taste, describing flavors, and finally, taste. If you tried local food, describe the flavors so the person can almost taste it. Rome example. The carbonara was rich and creamy, with the perfect balance of salty pancetta and sharp pecorino cheese. Each bite was pure comfort. Lima example. I tried ceviche for the first time, and the combination of fresh fish, tangy lime juice, and spicy chili peppers was incredibly refreshing and bold. Tokyo example. The ramen broth was deep and savory, with layers of flavor that had been simmering for hours. It warmed me from the inside out on that cold evening. See how it enriches the way you express yourself. Now let's move to part 4, where we'll describe memorable moments. Every trip has that special moment that stays engraved in memory. It can be an unexpected encounter, a spectacular view, or a unique experience. To introduce that special moment, you can use phrases like, "The highlight of my trip was followed by the description," or "One moment I'll never forget," is to emphasize that it marked you deeply. See some examples of how to describe these moments. Machu Picchu example. The highlight of my Peru trip was watching the sunrise over Machu Picchu. As the mist slowly lifted, the ancient ruins were revealed, piece by piece. It felt like traveling back in time. Serengeti example. One moment I'll never forget is when our safari jeep stopped and a family of elephants walked right past us. The baby elephant looked at me with curious eyes, and I felt this incredible connection with nature. Kyoto example. The most magical moment happened when I visited the Fushimi Inari Shrine at dawn. Walking through thousands of red torii gates with almost no one around felt deeply spiritual and peaceful. You can also create suspense by saying, "You whoa, unbelieve what happened next," or then something unexpected occurred before revealing the special moment. Now, in part 5, we'll connect events in the narrative for your story to flow naturally. You need to connect events logically. Use transition words to organize the sequence of events. See practical examples of how to connect your narrative using time sequence. First, I explored the old town of Prague. Then, I crossed the famous Charles Bridge. After that, I climbed up to the castle for an incredible view. Later that evening, I enjoyed a traditional Czech dinner. Finally, I watched the astronomical clock strike midnight. Adding extra information, the food in Vietnam was incredible. Besides that, the people were so warm and welcoming. On top of that, everything was surprisingly affordable, which made the trip even better. Contrasting experiences, I loved the beaches in Bali. However, the traffic in the main tourist areas was quite chaotic. On the other hand, when I ventured to the northern part of the island, it was peaceful and authentic. Now comes the best part. In part 6, we'll see a practical dialogue between two travelers, Sarah and Mike, telling two stories.
Hey, Mike, I heard you just came back from Southeast Asia. How was your trip?
Oh, Sarah, it was absolutely incredible. I spent 3 weeks traveling through Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia. The moment I arrived in Bangkok, I was completely overwhelmed by the energy of the city. The streets were buzzing with life, day and night, and the smell of street food was everywhere you turned.
That sounds amazing. I've always wanted to go there. What was the highlight of your trip?
That's a tough question because there were so many highlights. But if I had to choose, I'd say visiting the floating markets in Thailand was unforgettable. I woke up at 5 in the morning, which was challenging, but it was totally worth it. As soon as I got there, I was stunned by the vibrant colors. Vendors in traditional wooden boats were selling fresh tropical fruits, colorful flowers, and steaming hot local dishes. The water reflected the golden morning sunlight, and it was just breathtaking.
Wow, I can almost picture it. The way you describe it makes me feel like I'm there. Did you try any interesting food?
Oh, yes! The food was one of the best parts. I tried this coconut pancake called kanam krok that was sweet and crispy on the outside, but soft and creamy on the inside. It literally melted in my mouth. And the mango sticky rice was beyond my expectations. The combination of sweet mango, coconut cream, and sticky rice was so simple, yet so flavorful. I must have eaten it 5 times during my trip.
That sounds delicious. You're making me hungry just talking about it. I had a similar experience with food when I was in Italy last month. The moment I walked into this small, family-run trattoria in Rome, the aroma of fresh basil, garlic, and tomato sauce filled the air. It felt so authentic and welcoming, like being invited into someone's home.
I love those kinds of places. They always have the best food. So, what brought you to Italy? Was it your first time?
Actually, it was my third time, but this trip was different. I decided to explore smaller towns instead of just the major cities. I spent a week in Tuscany, and it was incredibly peaceful. Rolling hills covered with vineyards, medieval villages on hilltops, and the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen. The pace of life there was so slow and relaxing compared to my usual routine.
That sounds perfect. Did anything surprising or unexpected happen during your trip?
Actually, yes. One evening in Venice, I got completely lost trying to find my hotel. Instead of panicking, I just decided to wander through the narrow streets and see where they would take me. Then I stumbled upon this hidden square that wasn't in any guidebook. There was a small cafe with outdoor tables, and a street musician was playing the violin. The sound of the music echoing through the old stone buildings gave me goosebumps. I sat there for an hour just soaking in the atmosphere.
That's the beauty of traveling, right? Sometimes the best moments are the unplanned ones. I had a similar experience in Hanoi. I was walking around the old quarter and I heard this beautiful singing coming from a small temple. I went inside and there was a ceremony happening. Even though I didn't understand the language, the experience was deeply moving. The smell of incense, the chanting, the peaceful faces of the people praying, it all created this incredibly spiritual atmosphere.
Those are the moments that stay with you forever. So, what's next on your travel list?
I'm thinking about South America next year, maybe Peru to see Machu Picchu or Argentina for the wine regions and Patagonia. What about you?
I'm dreaming of Japan. I want to experience the cherry blossom season, visit ancient temples in Kyoto, and, of course, eat all the ramen and sushi I can find.
That sounds fantastic. You know, talking about our trips like this makes me realize how lucky we are to have these experiences. Every journey teaches us something new, not just about the places we visit, but about ourselves too.
Absolutely. And sharing these stories with others inspires them to travel and create their own memories. That's what I love most about it.
See the practical example of a conversation between two travelers. Notice how they didn't just list places, but shared emotions, sensory details, and memorable moments. This makes the conversation much more interesting and engaging. Let's highlight some important elements of this dialogue. First, observe the use of descriptive verbs that bring the narrative to life. Instead of simply saying, "I saw all the time," Mike and Sarah used verbs like stumbled upon, soaking in, wandering through, and buzzing with life. These verbs create much more vivid mental images. Also note emotion expressions like "I was stunned," "It gave me goosebumps," "It was deeply moving," which connect the listener emotionally with the story. The use of the moment I arrived, and as soon as I got there helps create a sense of immediacy, as if the person were reliving that exact moment. Additionally, pay attention to the contrast and addition constructions that make the narrative more sophisticated. Phrases like, "Instead of panicking, I just decided to," double quotes, show a perspective shift. The use of "even though I didn't understand" adds depth by acknowledging limitations but still valuing the experience. Transition words like "actually then," "so," and "besides" keep the conversation flowing naturally. And observe how both travelers used specific sensory details: the smell of incense, the sound of music echoing, the aroma of fresh basil that transforms simple descriptions into multidimensional experiences that the listener can almost feel. Comment below which part of this dialogue caught your attention most and why. Now, I'll share with you the extra powerful tip I promised at the beginning. The sensory details method. The sensory details method. This technique will completely transform how you tell your travel stories in English. It's very simple, but incredibly effective. Whenever you're going to describe an experience, ask yourself these 5 questions. What did I see? Think about colors, shapes, light, movement. What did I hear? Sounds, music, voices, silence. What did I smell? Aromas of food, nature, perfumes. What did I touch or feel physically? Temperature, textures, sensations on skin. What did I taste? Flavors of food, drinks, even the air. You don't need to use all 5 senses in every story, but the more you include, the more vivid and memorable your narrative will be. People will remember your stories because you transported them to that place through words. I'll give a complete example using this technique. Imagine you're describing a visit to a local market in Marrakesh. Walking through the souk in Marrakesh was a complete sensory experience. I saw colorful spices piled high in perfect pyramids, bright yellow turmeric, deep red paprika, and golden saffron. I heard merchants calling out prices, the clinking of metal teapots, and traditional Moroccan music playing from hidden speakers. I smelled the sweet aroma of mint tea, mixing with the earthy scent of leather goods and the spicy fragrance of incense. I felt the warm afternoon sun on my shoulders and the smooth texture of hand-woven carpets under my fingertips. And I tasted fresh dates and sweet almond pastries that a friendly vendor offered me. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. See how this description creates a complete experience? The person listening can almost be there with you. That's the power of the sensory details method. Recap and encouragement. So, let's quickly recap what you learned today. First, you discovered how to go beyond basic phrases and add context and emotion to your descriptions. Second, you learned to use the 5 senses to create rich and engaging narratives. Third, you saw a real dialogue between 2 travelers and noticed how to use descriptive verbs, emotion, expressions, and transition words. And finally, you learned 5 advanced words that will elevate your vocabulary. But remember, the goal of this type of video is for you to have complete understanding of what was spoken and explained. Therefore, I strongly recommend you watch this video at least twice. The first time, you absorb the information. The second time, you consolidate the learning and can even pause to practice some phrases out loud. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue improving your English naturally and effectively, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive notifications of new videos. Leave your like if this content was useful to you. It helps me a lot to continue creating quality videos. And please leave a comment telling which part you enjoyed most in this lesson. Was it the 5 senses technique, the dialogue between travelers, the difficult words, or maybe some specific example that inspired you? I read all comments and love knowing what's working for you. Remember, slow English is the best path to develop real and lasting fluency. When you understand completely and practice calmly, you build a solid foundation that will accompany you forever. Thank you for being here with me today. Keep practicing, keep telling your stories, and keep believing in your potential. You're on the right path. See you in the next video.